Okay, let's get started. Thanks everybody for joining this morning. My name's Steve Muir. This is the pre-exercise briefing for the upcoming 2025 functional exercise that is being sponsored by the Chicago Healthcare System Coalition for Preparedness and Response. This year's exercise will focus on a multi-tornado mass casualty incident and utility failure for all of our participants. So for this briefing, if you have questions, please post those on the chat board, and we'll be monitoring the chat board throughout the discussion. Okay, just a quick note, we are recording this briefing. We're going to send out a link to the recorded briefing after today's meeting to those that weren't able to attend during the scheduled time. Okay, as far as what we're going to cover today, I'm going to spend some time reviewing the content that is in the exercise plan. We'll touch on some of the exercise tasks with the EMS pre-hospital pieces, and then I'm going to review all of the hospital and FEOC play elements. And then my colleague, Josh Dice, is going to review all the non-hospital play elements. And within that, we're going to also go over the online evaluation tools that have been set up for both the hospitals and non-hospital healthcare partners. We'll wrap it up with a quick few notes about the sign-in sheet, and then we'll answer any questions that folks have about the exercise. Okay, let's jump into it. I'm going to switch gears here real quick and move over to the exercise plan. Let me just pull this up real quick. Okay, so the exercise plan, you all should have a copy of this document. If you don't, please just shoot us a note on the chat and we'll make sure you get it. This document, we would recommend that you share this out to all the participants from your team that will be playing in the exercise. There's lots of helpful information in there that can support your preparation for the exercise, as well as ensure expectations for what we're going to actually address on exercise day. Okay, the way this document is structured, you'll see that we've got some information here on upfront tasks that you should address to prepare for the exercise, administrative handling instructions, and then the general information includes a lot of the background information about the exercise, our scope, objectives, artificialities, and roles and responsibilities. Exercise logistics talks largely about the format and rules and instructions for the exercise. We also include the exercise schedule on here. And then there is a pretty good deal of information on the exercise scenario. Because this is the medical response surge exercise that has several other functions wrapped around it, because it is the medical response surge exercise, we need to include a lot of this background information in terms of total casualties, EMS transports, patient distribution, and things like that. And then there is towards the end, you'll see all of the questions and tasks that we're going to address for the exercise, regardless if you're a hospital or a non-hospital healthcare partner or the FEOC or any other organization. All of the tasks for the exercise are included in the X plan. I would recommend that they take a look at that prior to the exercise, again, just to ensure appropriate expectations. And then towards the end, you'll see a QR code and a link for a feedback survey. Okay, just a few notes here on exercise preparation. Obviously, you've registered your organization for this exercise. That's why you're on this call. Just make sure that you have your registration link to log in available before the exercise. Controllers and evaluators, you're getting all the information today. Every hospital, every healthcare organization needs to have at least one person that's assigned as an evaluator Okay, so that evaluator is going to be responsible for entering all this information into the online form during the exercise. More to come on that here in just a bit. EM resource, hospitals, you're going to be needing to access EM resource for this exercise. Please make sure that you have it ready to pull up and somebody that's able to access data from that system. For your command center, because this is a functional exercise, the expectation is that all healthcare organizations activate their command center. Within that, you're going to need to have access to various systems and tools to include things like EM resource, your Starcom radio, the Teams channel that will. You can please get everybody to mute your lines. Please mute your lines. Okay. You'll need at least two computers in there, one to access data from other systems, and we would recommend one to follow along with the exercise control during the exercise. So that the exercise control, all of the scenario and tasking information is going to be delivered to everyone simultaneously. I'm going to breeze through some of this information because we're going to cover it more in the slides here in a bit. But there are some things I wanted to highlight in this document. Okay, we're going to cover more of this here in just a bit, but extremely important, extremely important. Every healthcare organization, regardless if you're a hospital or if you're a non-hospital healthcare organization, needs to submit an online evaluation for this exercise. My recommendation is that you have somebody assigned to enter this information in real time as you're going through the exercise. That is the best way to capture all this information. I would recommend doing it in real time as your team is going through the exercise. So make sure that you have at least one person that's assigned to capture information from your team and all the responses and enter it into those forms. So there are two separate forms. We're going to get into do a little bit of a deeper dive here in a bit. But for hospitals, your evaluation form is on EM resource. Non-hospital healthcare organizations, yours is a separate forms survey that you can access with the link that you see here on the exercise plan. Okay, in terms of the format of the exercise, every organization is expected to play from their home base, from their command center. We'll also have the Public Health Emergency Operations Center up and running, and they will be processing information throughout the exercise. We will also have what we call a simulation cell that will be set up that will serve as a resource that simulates the actions of non-playing agencies. So if there's a non-playing agency, such as, for example, Red Cross or other types of agencies that you want to get an understanding of what they might be doing during this type of response, we can simulate that for you. So that is all available through the Teams chats on the day of the exercise. A few other informational pieces here. You may have a need to contact the FIOC. If you do, the phone number and email address are included on here. And we also have several other folks that are assigned to various elements of the exercise as lead controllers. So for the FIOC, our lead controller is Ann Hammer, and you see her cell phone number there. My name's Steve Muir. I'll be the hospital lead controller. Cell phone numbers there. Non-hospital organizations, Joshua Dice is going to be your controller. If your facility is going to be utilizing volunteers for this exercise, CDPH has a volunteer coordinator that's been assigned. That's Andrea, and her contact information is here on the exercise plan. Couple notes here in terms of logging in for the exercise. I would recommend logging in by 8 a.m. To make sure that you have good connectivity, that you can see the screen, we can hear each other, all that good stuff, and be prepared to assemble your command team from 8:30 to 12 to respond to the exercise injects. Okay, just a couple of notes. If your organization experiences an emergency, As always, real-world emergencies and actions take priority over exercise play. If you're experiencing an emergency, always call a timeout, stop play, address the emergency, and do not start play until it's safely to do so. Okay, these are just a few notes here about during the exercise. We'll have a sign-in sheet that was all sent to you ahead of time. Want you to make sure that you capture information on that sign-in sheet for all of your participants from your facility. Okay, for hospitals, again, this is where you're going to find the online evaluation guide survey. That's going to be on EM Resource. We're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive here in just a bit. After the exercise, as always, we want to get anonymous feedback from every participant if we can. So this is a separate survey that we want to send out to all of the participants to get their anonymous online feedback. We will ask every organization to conduct an internal hot wash for their facility following the conclusion of the webinar broadcast. We will do a brief hot wash during the exercise, but we would recommend doing a deeper dive for some more facility-specific actions internally with your group. Again, safety always takes priority over exercise events. If you are encountered with an issue that may impede safety, please call a timeout, stop play, address the safety issue, and don't start play until it's safe to do so. We always recommend assigning somebody at your facility if you're going to be moving around people, equipment, or staff or stuff. Assign somebody to serve as a safety officer. Again, real-world emergencies take precedence. Okay, here is our schedule. Please note that we've got several modules here, 3 modules, but there's several tasks embedded in each module. Some of those may bleed into the following module. So, for example, if your team is working on module 1 and we move on to module 2 and you're not done with module 1, continue working on module 1 until it's done. Same thing for modules 2 and 3. Okay, so we want you to log in by 8. Get your team assembled. Let's make sure we can see and hear each other. We're going to kick off the exercise promptly at 8:30 a.m. with an introduction of the scenario, the format, and the rules of the exercise. And then at 8:45, we're going to start the exercise with a pre-hospital coordination discussion with our CFD EMS partners, partners from MABUS, as well as CDPH and the RHCC, really to just gain an understanding and awareness of that pre-hospital coordination and hospital patient distribution process. And then at 9:30, we're going to start all of our partners with a flurry of tasks, and they're going to be broken up a little bit to where we have very specific hospital and FIOC tasks, and then very specific non-hospital tasks. So when we begin this piece of the exercise, we're going to break everybody up into 2 separate rooms. One room is going to be all of our hospitals and FIOC partners. The other room is going to be all of our non-hospital healthcare organizations, and that includes long-term care, nursing home, dialysis, home health agencies, FQHCs, et cetera. If you're not a hospital in your healthcare organization, you'll go into that room. It's very intuitive to be able to get into the room. So when we begin that, then each module is going to have separate tasking for each group. Module 1 is going to deal with initial response and stabilization, initial actions, utility failure, and initial bed counts. Module 2 will deal with surge management and continuity of operations, decompression, rapid discharge, patient triage, and mission decisions. In that second module, hospitals, that's where we're going to ask you to submit a lot of the specific Mercy data. Then we're going to move on to module 3. That's where we're going to get into considerations for patient transfers, reunification, and recovery. And that's going to include all of our healthcare organizations as well. And then lastly, when the non-hospital room, we're going to have an independent facility-led hot wash with those organizations, and then we're going to end the exercise promptly at 12:30. Okay, let me just kind of breeze through some of this information here. Also, what you'll see on the exercise plan is for hospitals, how many patients each hospital will be receiving. Then there's an example here of the patient profiles. We'll do a little bit of a deeper dive on those in a bit. And then all of our questions and exercise tasks. So you see all those on here. They're broken up by discipline here. So EMS, hospitals, non-hospital partners, and that goes through all the way through by module. It's got our FIAC tasks in there. Okay, so again, this document, the exercise plan, we would recommend that you share this out with all of the participants from your organization. Before I move on, I'll pause and just turn to Nicole. Nicole, do we have any questions we need to address on the chat at this time?
Not at the moment.
Okay. All right. We're going to keep rocking and rolling here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the hospital and FIAC play. Now, remember, hospitals and the FIAC are going to be in one room on the webinar. Non-hospital organizations are going to be in another room. So after I present this content for the hospitals and FIAC players, my colleague Josh Dice is going to address the content for the non-hospital partners. Okay, let's get into it here. 1 second. All right. We're going to ask every organization to conduct an internal safety brief. The sign-in sheets, we're going to ask you to email those to Nicole. If you're having any audio problems, just send us a message through the Teams platform or contact one of the controllers. And then that feedback survey, we're going to make sure everybody is queued up on that before the exercise. Okay, for communications, and this is for every organization, very, very important that you always begin and end every communication, whether it's verbal or written, with "this is an exercise." We do not want to have anybody mistake this for a real incident or event. So always begin and end each written or verbal message with "this is an exercise." For facilities with STARCOM, radios will be used for information sharing during the exercise. So make sure you're monitoring that STARCOM radio and be ready to respond. A simulation cell, again, that's going to be available on the chat board. There's our agenda we went over earlier. Okay, real quick on objectives. We've got 8 objectives established for this exercise. Now, this exercise is a bit unique because it is the medical response surge exercise that we've done for several years in the past. And it's that as the core of the exercise, but we have several other functions that are wrapped around it. So we've got a lot of things like reunification, continuity of operations, inclusion of our non-hospital healthcare partners that really makes this a comprehensive and robust exercise, not just the traditional medical response surge exercise. So our first objective is that coalition healthcare facilities and response partners activate their command centers and staff. This is a functional exercise at minimum. So if some of you have chosen to do this as a full scale with real volunteers and things like that, that's awesome. That's great. Every organization that's participating, at the minimum, make sure you activate your command center and be ready to process information in and out of that command center. Mass notification processes are activated for the core 4. So be prepared to issue and respond to alerts and requests for information as those notifications go out. Objective 3, coordination within the command environment addresses key concerns such as reunification, utility failure, and evacuation. Objective 4, CDPH supports the response with resource coordination, incident management, and guidance. Objective 5, acute care hospitals optimize staffing, beds, equipment, and supplies to manage the surge in patients. Objective 6, Non-hospital healthcare organizations address continuity needs, particularly in weather-related disasters. Objective 7, EMS officials coordinate pre-hospital patient distribution, medical control, and mutual aid activation. And then Objective 8 is actually a metric from ASPR that we need to measure, and that deals with the after-action review that we're going to conduct after the exercise. So the expectation is that at least one person from each organization participate in that after-action review. Okay, module 1, initial stabilization and infrastructure stabilization. Okay, just a little bit of background on this scenario. We're going to go in real time with this. June 4th, early morning, Chicago residents are waking up to news broadcasts of potential for severe weather. Strong line of thunderstorms has formed shortly after dawn and is approaching the greater Chicago area. Forecasts are speculating that these have great potential to spawn tornadoes. People are urged to monitor their phones, TVs, radios, and if possible, stay indoors until the weather threat passes. It's the peak rush hour, and the commute is busy despite the severe weather threat. Guess what? At 7:30 a.m., we got the start of a multi-tornado outbreak in Chicago in 3 densely populated neighborhoods on the south side in Roseland, in Lincoln Square on the north side, and then also on the west side in North Lawndale. All 3 of these tornadoes occurred within a 30-minute period. 911 calls start to come into the city dispatch reporting collapsed buildings and trapped victims and downed power lines. Power outages are affecting wide swaths of the city, including acute care hospitals, long-term care facilities, and other healthcare partners. Hospitals assume your power will be out at your hospital for approximately 60 minutes. Okay, so what we want you to do is also assume that, that this is just an assumption. We're still going to need to carry on the exercise, so don't assume that your computers or lights in your command center aren't working. Really, the intent of that is to get you to start to delve into a discussion around what it means to go on generator power at your facility. Okay, surge of injured patients is expected to include EMS transports and self-transports to all medical facilities. Okay, then we're going to have a discussion with our EMS partners, the RHCC and MABUS, around the ability to transport a large volume of victims following a tornado incident. These are the questions. These are standard questions for Mercy. We've added a couple that make it unique to Chicago. Really, we're looking for whether or not EMS can bring to bear adequate numbers of EMS transport vehicles like BLS and ALS capable assets, and if necessary, multiple patient transport vehicles. We're going to expect a conversation to ensue around the mutual aid activation and escalation process. We'll talk a little bit about additional resources they need, the process for providing updates to hospitals, and then we'll engage EMS and our RHCC on a discussion around the patient distribution process and how that would work in this type of scenario, and how and who is responsible for determining patient locations. And then we're going to separate everybody into those breakout rooms. So hospitals and FIAC in one room, non-hospital partners in the other. So let's talk about the hospitals and FIAC tasks. So the FIAC tasks in Module 1, they're going to use STARCOM to communicate with coalition partners, receive operational status reports from STARCOM 21. That's just from a limited number of hospitals. We will also, the FIAC is going to obtain EM-powered data sets. This is something new that we're looking at this year to analyze areas and communities within the city that have high concentrations of people that are on electric-dependent durable medical equipment. So they'll use that data to review estimates of people that may require hospitalization and what type of medical equipment is considered critical in the very early stages of this type of response. So really interesting tasking there for the FIAC. Hospitals, we're going to expect you to acknowledge that initial notification from STARCOM. We're going to have you at the very beginning here just getting ready to respond to the incident. So Start to organize, start to identify your mobilization actions, how your team is going to organize. What are your operational objectives if this were a real incident? So we're going to ask you to come up with that and actually answer that information in the online exercise evaluation guide. So all the questions you see here, they go in direct sequence with that guide, and we'll go over that guide in just a bit. Essential elements of information, or EEIs. What are those essential elements of information your hospital would request from a tornado response, and who would you request that information from? Now, as it relates to going on generator power hospitals, what we're looking for here is really a discussion, deep dive discussion with your team on what are the impacts of your hospital going on generator power. What areas are or are not powered by the generator at your facility? You may I would strongly advise that you get somebody from facilities in the room for this discussion. How long can your facility sustain on generator power given your fuel supply? And then what is the contact information for your ComEd large customer service agent? That's an important piece of information to know, because when we've done this with other hospitals in the past, understanding that information does help to start to drive the restoration process and during power outages. Okay, then we're going to move hospitals into task 2. This is when we're going to get into a lot of the traditional hard mercy data. So as you recall from years past, we're going to ask you specific information about census and units, census in the ED, total numbers of people in the hospital, total numbers of people in adult ICU, total numbers of patients in adult medical surgical, total numbers in PICU, total numbers in general pediatrics. Those are the 6 numerical elements we're looking for at the very beginning. And then we're going to move on to module 2. This is where we're going to get into surge management and COOP. Okay, so here is our surge target. Initial estimates from the scene indicate that we've got about 500 total patients that are going to need to be transported across hospitals throughout Chicago. One thing you'll see on here is the number of reds is significant. 329 of those 500 patients are reds, so you can expect some pretty severe acuities arriving at your emergency departments. Also note that we've got a high percentage of pediatric patients here. Over half of these patients are pediatric. So if your hospital does not have a pediatric capability, one part of this exercise is going to be towards the later tasks, transferring those patients out to hospitals that can provide an appropriate level of care. Okay, module 2, FIOC. FIOC staff working with EM Power Data provide estimates on number, type of care anticipated and transport needs from the most impacted neighborhoods. They'll support relocation or service suspensions planning for high-risk facilities like long-term care or dialysis centers. They'll prepare talking points for a unified, accurate public message focused on healthcare access and safety. That message is intended for city agency PIO communications and sharing to healthcare partners. They will also send out a message that power has been restored that will be sent through EM Resource. We'll provide a situational update in that multiple facilities, particularly non-hospital facilities, reported continued power outages and implement continuity plans to maintain care during utility disruptions. Staff shortages emerge due to transportation issues and personal impacts. You can expect up to a 20% reduction in staffing availability at your hospital as a result. So be prepared to deal with that. Public messaging begins via CDPH and PIO partners to reduce panic and redirect the public away from overloaded facilities. Okay, hospitals, this is where we get into decompression. So the question and the task here is, how many patients, total patients, can your hospital project can be discharged, rapidly discharged or decompressed within a 4-hour time period? If necessary, can your hospital also expand bed space in critical patient care areas? Would your hospital ever decompress patients to a long-term care facility? If there are any patients that need to be transferred to another facility for the purposes of decompression, please contact the receiving facility to organize the transfer. And then as it relates to that 20% decrease in staffing availability, how does that impact your response? What steps can be taken to hold or hotel staff over their scheduled shifts? Okay, module 3. Moving right along, patient transfers, resources, and reunification. Here's our situational update for module 3. Hospitals receive a steady flow of patients, both self-transports and EMS transports. There are several friends and family members contacting hospitals looking for their loved ones. Some are showing up at the main entrance and emergency departments. Okay, FIAC. Utilize Empower data to identify high-risk individuals that need targeted outreach. Determine the strategy or algorithm to prioritize outreach and the team that will mobilize. Describe the prioritization of the wellness checks, what's communicated to those that are not part of the priority group to alleviate concerns. What's considered for the mobilized team as far as language and functional access needs. And then at 12:30, the FIAC index radio call will occur. Okay, in task 4 for hospitals, this is where you are going to review the list of your patients received. And I'll just pull up an example of these real quick. This is Illinois Masonics list. I think they've got about 30 patients. So you'll see a lot of reds, a few yellows, and some greens. The intent here is for each hospital to review every patient that's on this list and make a determination as to whether or not you would need to admit that patient into a unit, or if you can simply just treat their condition and release them, and discharge them from the emergency department. So do you need to admit them, or can you treat and release? And so what we're looking for there is actual data on that. So how many of those patients that are on that list would need to be admitted as inpatients? And then how many can be treated and released without being admitted? Okay. Moving right along, task 5. If there aren't, this is kind of a tough one, but I want to talk through this for a bit. So imagine if you have let's say if you're a Masonic and you've got those 30 patients. Let's say out of those 30 patients, 20 of them need to be admitted. If you only have, let's say for the sake of argument, you only have enough patients, or if you have, let's say 5 of those patients need to be stabilized and transported because they need to go to a hospital with a higher level of care, that means that you need to transfer some patients out. So were there any patients that require inpatient admission that you do not have an available staff bed for at your hospital? If the answer to that is yes, then we'll need you to go on to the next 2 questions. If the answer is no, then you can move on to reunification. So if you're able to accommodate all your patients that you receive, then you just move on to reunification. If you're not, what we're going to ask you to do is tell us how many you need to transfer out. And then let's stick with that same example we had. If you have 5 patients that need to be transferred out, what we need you to do then is pick up the phone and work through the process of transferring those 5 patients. We're not going to prescribe how you do it. Many of you will keep those within system. That's totally fine. Or if you can't keep them within system, work with your resource hospital or RHCC to find a destination for those patients. Activate family reunification plans. So identify a location to set up your reunification operations. Identify personnel to staff that operation. Implement secure patient family member identification, verification, and tracking, especially for minors and incapacitated individuals. Develop any messages or scripts for staff when communicating with family members. Okay, we're getting there, guys. We're getting towards the end here. The best way, I'm going to show you how this first one here, I'm going to show you in the survey in just a bit, the best way to answer that. So what that is we have Asper gives us a listing of personnel types. And basically what they want to know is, given the volume of surge that your hospital received, do you feel like you had an adequate level of that staffing type at your facility, either currently or available to recall within 2 hours of incident awareness? So I'll show you how to answer that here in just a bit when we show you the survey. Then we get 2 injects around resource requests. And what we're going to ask you to do is just go through the process of requesting these resources as you normally would. If that means staying within system, that's fine. If that means going to another organization, that's fine as well. So the first inject is one of your outpatient sites that's critical to the response, requires a portable generator. We're going to ask you to request that resource from the appropriate source. Second inject, your hospital needs O-negative blood to meet the demands of the patient surge. Request that resource from the appropriate source. And then we're going to ask you a question around resources and the types of resources that, based on this scenario, it being a tornado scenario, what are the resources that you feel are going to be in the highest demand, shortest supply for this scenario, and who would you request those resources from? Okay, we're gonna bring everybody back into the plenary. We're gonna do a hospital debrief. We're gonna just call in a few hospitals to let us know what their experience was on the day. Then we're gonna close the webinar and ask each hospital to conduct their own hot wash internally. Address what went well at your facility, identify gaps and potential solutions to address them. And evaluators, please make sure that you capture information and metrics and document those on that resource survey tool. And then the QR code here, guys, this is for every person at your facility. So if you have 50 people that participate in the exercise, have 50 people fill this out, if they would. It takes only about 5 minutes. It really gives us some good information to help round out the after action report. This is separate from the exercise evaluation guide, which I will go over now. Okay, so hospitals, as you're working through the exercise, you're going to need to assign at least one person to document the responses for each of the questions and tasks. That documentation is going to occur on EM Resource. You'll click on that button right there. Another window will open up. I'm using Google Chrome. It seems to work just fine. All of the questions that are on here follow in direct sequence with the exercise. So we're going to ask you, obviously, for your name and email, what hospital you're evaluating, whether or not you got that initial alert. Oh, another thing here too. You'll see like hospitals, you'll see like the subject for each question or each field. And then if you just hover over the question there, you'll see like a more detailed description. So initial alert, did your hospital receive that STARCOM 21 initial alert verification or notification? Who received it? Where was it received? Okay, so just kind of hover over that question and you can see a more detailed description of each of those questions. Now, that one that I want to show you here is personnel asset availability. So basically, when we get to that, you're going to come down, you're going to see this whole list of personnel types. And what we really want to know is, do you feel like you had adequate levels of those types of personnel given the volume of surge? It's either yes, no, or that personnel type was not applicable to our facility or surge. Okay. All right, Nicole, I'm going to pause now to see if we have any questions that need to be addressed.
Not right now, no.
Okay. So, Mr. Dice, are you ready to talk non-hospitals?
Yep.
And I can pull that one up. All right, let me pull this up real quick.
I think we would probably start in module 1 on slide 11. All the
Okay.
upfront material I think is I believe is the same. So
Yep,
don't want to reiterate that.
got it.
Excellent. So hi, everybody. Again, my name is Joshua Dice. I'll be the controller on the non-hospital side of the house. So I'm really excited about that. I'm going to fly through these and try to keep us on time here, just to be respectful of everybody's time here. So again, now you see these module 1 tasks, there are several. As we move on, we will see that there are more facility type tasking and inject. So there is a little bit of customization there. So starting at the top and moving down, perform internal and external notifications. So that, in addition to the activation of your incident command team, is probably the most important in this initial module. After that, potentially a unique component of the non-hospital is to perform a rapid assessment of your facility's operational status and functional capabilities. So as you see there is a note that your controller can insert injects or assumptions about your facility status here. I am more than happy on the day of to help you, be creative and maybe help you send over some information on what is happening, what do you see at your facility if you aren't able at the time to come up with some of those initial damage assessments. I'm happy to throw you over some ideas and help facilitate that conversation for you all. Moving down, determine the immediate operational changes given your facility's impacts. Again, kind of led by that initial damage assessment. And if there are any current or anticipated limitations on patient care, communicate with the FIOC to activate, if needed, MOUs and other agreements with like facilities or similar facilities there. So this could include transfer support, resource capabilities needed, and what that time frame may be to actually receive those resources. So moving on now to slide 12. This is your first inject. So your facility has received between 5 and 15 community walk-ins. So the majority are just looking for shelter, water, restrooms due to storm displacement. So what does that look like in your facility? Maybe if it's already full, taking on another 5 or 15 beyond capacity, what does that actually look like? So conduct a head count of patient staffs and walk-ins. And, are there security needs due to the potential influx of non-patients, non-known, customers seeking shelter, and how is this addressed on the fly? So that is your first inject. That will apply to all facility types. And with that, we'll move to the your out brief. So that is module 1 for you all. So 3 facilities, just a forewarning, will be called upon to report out. So, of course, please raise your hand if you have any questions or considerations for the broader group. Would love to facilitate that conversation for you all. And these are the questions we'll work through. So what are the immediate challenges identified at your facility related to storm damage and power loss? And we'll talk more about that power loss component in module 2. Discuss activation of your incident command team, who initiated this activation and what does that call out procedure actually look like? What positions expertise were involved? How did you reach them? And if corporate was notified, what information was shared or what information was shared back, and do you know how to reach them in an emergency? So just kind of testing some of those communication procedures. And then what communication mechanisms and downtime procedures for documentation would be implemented in the event of an extended power loss. So that's the initial brief out for module 1. So moving on to module 2, the surge management and COOP. I think we'll skip these few slides and hop. I do want to harp on this one a little bit. You see it on there on the right-hand corner. Your controller may self-determine if your power remains out longer to test response elements. So we will leave it up to the facilities on how long your power will remain out. We've discussed this at length on our end, and some facilities may prefer to have shorter or longer periods of that power disruption. So we of course advocate for longer and really test that response procedures and really stress the systems. But we will leave that up to the individual facilities. So that is something that I wanted to pause here and let you know, and happy to help facilitate that if needed come exercise day. So on to module 2, tasking. So again, a handful here. Identify critical resource needs and submit to the FIOC or notionally to vendors, corporate or other suppliers. Consider generators, fuel, oxygen, medical supplies, or any other facility-specific resources that you may need. Address staffing issues, so identify functions that would be impacted the most with this 20% staff reduction, what strategies would be implemented to ensure the continuity of operation and the continuity of those critical services. And then determine if shelter in place or evacuation is necessary based on that damage assessment in module 1. So really those protective actions, and again, we will leave that up to the individual facilities to determine the level. But again, just want to say, if you need some help being creative on what your facility may see, I'm more than happy to send you some ideas. Please just contact me and I'll send that over. There are a few facility type questions or things to consider here. So our long-term care partners identify the triggers to evacuate. If applicable, activate activation protocols, identify facilities, transportation resources, and order of evacuation based on current patient census. So that is a unique call out for long-term care facilities. And then our other non-hospital partners determine the steps that you would take should operations be suspended for 2+ days. So again, just some unique characteristics there. Again, to go back to long-term care facilities, report bed availability for decompressed hospital patients to the FIAC. So again, just bringing everybody back to the FIAC a little bit, just making sure that those communication protocols are in place. And then lastly, those 2 last lines: conduct a command briefing to prepare your PIO, your public information officer, with talking points, everybody's favorite topic, their favorite job, and create a public facing statement. So I will be collecting those throughout the exercise. So you see my email there. Would love to collect those and include those in the after action report. Of course, sanitized of any facility name or anything like that, but that was something we captured last year, and we received several really awesome statements for that rad scenario. So then lastly, at 11 o'clock, the FIAC sends messages via EM resource requesting status updates, and then we just request that non-hospital partners respond to that. So that's the module 2 tasking for all non-hospital partners. And this is where we get to a little bit more of the unique facility injects. So for our long-term care partners, you can select one, or time permitting, do both. So the first being your backup generator is unable to maintain power to the HVAC system, so indoor temperatures increase, etc. So of course we're concerned about heat stress there. So there's one option for you all to choose from. That second being a family member calls demanding evacuation of their parent, citing fear of facility collapse, like air conditioning, etc. So just add maybe a little bit more realism and a complicating factor to an already stressful situation. Again, choose one, or again, time permitting, do both. We just thought these would be realistic injects to include for this scenario. Next, Steve. And for our FQHCs and dialysis partners, so FQHCs, 10 community members arrive requesting medication refills, wound care, and shelter. So similar to Module 1, you just have that another influx of patients, and there are several questions there that you may consider for how to respond to that, or how can you deal with that or absorb those patients in a sustainable way. And for our dialysis partners, city water reports a major plumbing station failure impacting your service area. Water pressure is below operational thresholds for dialysis. Estimated restoration time is unknown. So again, these you don't have an option to choose, as compared to a long-term care partner, but we thought these are both very realistic for a situation of this magnitude. So excited to hear that's what's reported out of both of those for those unique partners. Next slide. And outbrief. So this is module 2 outbrief. Again, I will call on 3 other facilities to report out, just giving the time. So prepare yourself in advance. I'll try to let those facilities know ahead of time who I'll call on and when, just so you're not surprised. So what critical resources what critical resource needs emerged and how are they identified? And there's 2 sub questions there. So how were unmet requests escalated or prioritized? And did you have the tools and partnerships in place needed to communicate needs, staff, and capabilities in real times? What staffing strategies did you employ? And if you selected an inject, again, time permitting, which one and how did you work through those tasks? So really excited. I'm personally very excited to hear how those were facilitated and what the response was and what you all learned. So that's your outbrief for module 2. Now on to module 3, patient transfer, reunification, and recovery. And we can skip to the next slide, Steve. I don't think anything is unique there. That's not in the hospital slides. Here, slightly less tasking. The last set, so activate family reunification plans. So that includes the identification of a location, the implementation of secure patient's family member implement secure patient family member identity verification. So how do you actually know that those are the correct people? And develop message scripts for staff when communicating with family members. And again, you can send those directly to me if you would like to share those. And everybody on my side will have my email ahead of time. Communicate expectations for data and records collected using downtime procedures or during downtime procedures to be entered into electronic record or billing systems. So what staff are assigned to do this activity? Does this impact other duties? And if so, how do you absorb that that additional work when things come back online? And then what is the timeline to complete it? Next, outlined the operational changes that will remain in place for the coming days until surges subside and supply chains are restored. So again, just a pretty standard supply chain question of what can you do in those supply chains, or what are you doing and how long can you be okay without those supply chains active. And then lastly, monitor staff well-being and fatigue level. So activate behavioral health of passive and active outreach procedures, if there are any, and we'd love to know if there aren't. And if they are, what do you do? So just capturing some of those best practices and gaps that may exist as it relates to behavioral health or staff well-being programming. So describe those tactics used at your facility if you have them, and who are the primary personnel involved. And then, of course, optional, craft an outreach message to staff that identifies resources. And again, I personally would love to see those. And of course, include like a sanitized version in the after action report if we feel it's a really strong example of an outreach message. Non-hospital partner injects, there's again a few for each facility type here. So long-term care partners, members of the public are demanding shelter and becoming agitated at the entrance. So just kind of pushing the security conversations a bit. So secure the facility, notify law enforcement if needed. Again, this is very notional. We want to make sure that this is treated as an exercise and that verbiage is used throughout. And then if your power remains out or unstable, if your controller really wants to push the conversations, generator fuel run out in 6 hours and no ETA on delivery due to regional shortages. So again, just pushing those conversations on being offline for longer than expected for our long-term care partners. Dialysis. A family member is upset that their relative has not received dialysis in over 48 hours and demands immediate transfer to a hospital. So again, the hospitals are overwhelmed still at this point. What does that conversation look like, and what mechanisms are in place at your facility to manage that? And then our FQHC partners, child who arrived with a walk-in group is unaccounted for after a crowd surge. No parent or guardian is present. So initiate your reunification protocols, including coordination with law enforcement. And then next scheduled delivery of vaccines, insulin, and basic medications delayed by 48 to 72 hours due to ongoing transport disruptions. So just trying to hit those more fragile supply chains that may exist. So just want to have that conversation there. And that's the last inject for our non-hospital partners for this exercise in module 3. So out brief, again, 3 new facilities, forewarning. I'll try to let you know beforehand that I'll be calling on you. But these are the 4 questions we'll hopefully have you guys work through. So select either family reunification, if applicable, or downtime procedures. What were the biggest challenges? What were the most significant strengths identified? And if the FIOC organized a situational awareness call, did you receive that notification? And did you join? Do you have any recommendations on information sharing as it relates to the non-hospital partner space? What inject did you select? Supply chain, unaccompanied minor, concerned family member, etc. And provide a few high-level observations on how the task was accomplished. And again, time permitted. And then what is your best practices related to mental health support for staff? So was there one opportunity to improve this in the area. So just a lot of after action mechanisms. So, and that is what we have for the non-hospital partners, very similar to what Steve mentioned. So I'll kick it back over to Steve.
Yeah, real quick, I just want to touch on the excuse me, let me get the so I need to pull up the there it is. Oop, that's not it. I need to pull up the evaluation form for the hospitals here. Here it is. Okay. So non-hospital organizations, your evaluation form is going to be different than the hospitals. So your evaluation form is a forms link, a survey that that is in the exercise plan. It will also be provided on the webinar chat board when we begin the exercise. So for every one of the questions and tasks, you'll need to assign someone to scribe the responses of the organization. So all of these fields go in direct sequence with the exercise. So yeah, just please make sure you hit submit at the very end so we get all your responses. And we're going to give a deadline of June 9th to submit this. But as I mentioned earlier, ideally, based on my experience, it's easiest to fill this out in real time as the exercise is going on. So anything more you wanted to talk about on this, Josh?
No, I think that's it, and happy to meet with any of the evaluators on the non-hospital side to walk through this in greater detail if that's needed. Very similar to last year, just the questions have been modified a bit to meet the intent of this year's exercise and scenario.
Thanks, Josh. And then we also have a blank sign-in sheet. You should all have a copy of this. If you do not, just shoot us a message on the chat board. We need one sign-in sheet per organization. Please make sure that you fill this out and make sure it's legible. Typed is best, but if you have to handwrite it, please print. And then make sure that you email the sign-in sheet to nicole@themirgroup.com immediately following the conclusion of the exercise. And with that, I'll turn to Nicole and see if we have any questions on the board.
We don't have any questions, but we do have a comment from Molly. CDPH has an extra evaluator available if any hospitals or non-hospital partners would like to take advantage of an external evaluator for the exercise. If you're interested, you can reach out to Molly at CDPH. Her email address is in the chat board.
Excellent. Yeah, take advantage of that, guys. There are evaluators available for your facility. So please take advantage. Let Molly know. Any other questions on the board? Comments?
Luis Sanchez from the Claire would like for Josh to reach out to him about some additional situations and questions that could apply to LTC facilities.
Sounds good. Okay, so right now it's almost about 2 weeks before the exercise starts. So we got some time. If there are things that come up with your facility, questions, challenges, anything that comes up relative to this exercise, please reach out to us. I posted both Josh and my information on the chat board. If you have questions, please just let us know and we'll be happy to work through anything relative to the exercise with you ahead of time. Just please don't email us the morning of the exercise. It'll be tough to get anything done. But we got 2 weeks, plenty of time to address any of your concerns. Okay, with that, if there are no other questions or comments, we're going to go ahead and close this briefing 1 minute early. We will send out a recorded link to everyone as well as those that weren't able to attend today. Thanks, everybody. We look forward to a great exercise on June 4th.